I'm on a seafood diet. I see food, and I eat it. Today, I'm going to recap a 1994 fantasy horror film called Interview with the Vampire: The Vampire Chronicles. A quick warning, there will be major spoilers ahead. In modern-day San Francisco, reporter Daniel Malloy sets up recording equipment in a rundown upper-level apartment. He intends to interview Louis Dupont-Dulac, who claims to be a vampire. Malloy is skeptical until Louis brashly displays his supernatural gifts, moving swiftly across the room to turn on a light. Louis' skin is translucent, and he uses charm. Louis begins his story in 1791, where he is a young plantation owner, living on his estate in Louisiana. Having lost the will to live, due to the deaths of his wife and infant child in childbirth, he squanders his wealth and gambles in shady bars, welcoming death. While wandering the waterfront, drunk and in company of a harlot, he is attacked by a vampire named Lestat de Lioncourt. The woman is killed and Louis is fed on, but allowed to live. Lestat has sensed Louis' descent for life, and returns to him to offer him a new one, giving him the choice I never had. Louis meets Lestat in a cemetery, where the vampire drains him to the point of death before offering him his own blood. Doing so transforms Louis into a newborn vampire, and he is amazed at the change. However, he quickly comes to regret his decision and finds feasting on humans immoral, whereas Lestat revels in the pleasure of killing. As such, Louis begins to suffer and survives by feasting on rats and other small animals. Lestat lives with Louis at his plantation, and the slaves begin to grow anxious by his presence. At a party, Lestat convinces Louis to seduce a wealthy but older heiress in order to drink her blood. While Lestat feasts on her powdered servant, Louis attempts to feed, but goes for the woman's irate poodles instead. Hearing the commotion and the woman's terrified cries, Lestat rushes over and snaps her neck and berates Louis. In the interview, Malloy asks about vampire stereotypes: coffins, crucifixes, garlic, and stakes through the heart. Louis admits that most are nonsense, except coffins. Secure and comfortable, they are one of the only sensible things a vampire can rest in, with no fear of the light. During an evening at home, Louis has a rare moment alone with his servant Yvette, who confides that she and the other slaves are concerned about their master, and how he never eats or comes out during the day anymore. She comforts Louis, but he takes her wrist and feeds from her. She screams, and Louis suddenly has to stifle her. The other slaves, having grown suspicious of him over time, approach the mansion with torches to see Louis carrying Yvette's body out. Louis grabs one of the torches, tells the slaves their master is damned and that they should leave, and sets the mansion on fire. Lestat arrives and scolds Louis, who seems bent on punishing himself for his sins. Lestat takes them to a mausoleum, where they can sleep safely during the day. Eventually they find a new dwelling in New Orleans, but Louis remains despondent, refusing to feed on humans, even when Lestat has them offered on a silver platter. In one instance, Lestat brings home 2 prostitutes and toys with them before killing them, trying to entice Louis to give in to his nature, to end his suffering. Lestat's philosophy is one of pleasure out of necessity. They must feed, so why not have fun? He tries to persuade Louis to end his suffering, to no avail. Louis wanders the streets one night and stumbles on a sector infested with the plague. He discovers a little girl weeping at the decomposing body of her mother. She runs to Louis for comfort, but he is suddenly overcome with hunger and feeds from her. Lestat appears, laughing and celebrating Louis' break from abstinence by dancing with the girl's dead mother. Louis flees but laments that he finally felt what peace could be by allowing himself to be a vampire. He returns to the home he shares with Lestat to find that he's brought the little girl back with him alive. Appealing to Louis' compassion and to convince him to stay with him, Lestat turns the girl, making her a vampire, and names her Claudia. Louis resents Lestat for this, but comes to love Claudia as his own daughter. He and Lestat dote on her and shower her with luxurious clothes and dolls, and Claudia grows into a talented killer, using her childlike charms to lure her victims. Lestat is proud of his apt pupil. But though time passes, Claudia remains a little girl immortal. When she finally realizes she can never grow old and look as other women do, she becomes furious. She demands that Louis tell her how she came to be, and after hearing the story, blame Lestat for her condition. She tells Louis that it's time for them to leave Lestat, and devises a plan since Lestat would never let them go. On the basis of a truce, she fools Lestat into drinking dead blood from 2 boys she overdosed with laudanum. Having fed from the dead, Lestat is incapacitated and Claudia slits his throat. She and Louis take Lestat into the bayou and dump his body in alligator-infested waters. They return home to pack, intent on leaving for Europe to start a new life, but Lestat returns, decrepit but alive, having fed on alligators and other animals in the swamp. He attacks Claudia for having been a very naughty little girl, but Louis sets him and their home on fire. Louis and Claudia flee and make it to their ship in time to see the whole neighborhood aflame. They travel through the Mediterranean and across Europe, seeking other vampires but never finding any. Eventually, they settle in Paris. One night, Louis encounters a vampire named Santiago, who taunts him before meeting Armand, a seductive vampire who theorizes that after 400 years, he must be the oldest vampire in the world. Armand invites Louis and Claudia to live with him at his coven, the theater to vampires where vampires pretending to be humans, pretending to be vampires stage horror shows for humans, though they actually feast on unsuspecting patrons. Claudia is disgusted by their cheap theatrics, but Louis is drawn to Armand by his charm and wisdom. Santiago is able to read Louis' mind and suspects that he and Claudia murdered their companion Lestat, of whom they knew a taboo among vampires. Claudia is a taboo herself, in that no vampire should create an undead child. With this knowledge, Armand tries to get Louis to leave Claudia to live with him. Louis is tempted, yearning to learn what he could not from Lestat. Sensing that he is leaving, Claudia demands that Louis leave her a companion and brings a woman named Madeleine to their home. Madeleine has agreed to change for Claudia so that she can adopt her. Louis reluctantly concedes. However, as soon as Madeleine completes her transformation, the Parisian vampires invade the home and abduct the three of them. They encase Louis in a metal coffin and trap Claudia and Madeleine in a well, open to the sky above. At dawn, Madeleine and Claudia are burned to death by the sun, before Louis, freed by Armand, can get to them. Enraged and grieving over his loss of Claudia, Louis sets the coven on fire, killing most of the vampires. He escapes with Armand, who again offers him a place by his side. Louis refuses. Decades pass and Louis wanders the world dejected and alone, before eventually returning to the United States and returns to New Orleans. One evening, he finds himself visiting his old plantation and mansion, neglected and in ruin. There, he discovers Lestat living alone, a shadow of his former self who cringes at car headlights and hasn't adapted to the new world. Louis pities Lestat and leaves him. This concludes the interview with Molly, but to Louis' disdain, Daniel only sees the potential power in being a vampire and requests that Louis turn him. Louis retorts that his life is nothing but suffering and angered, leaves the apartment in a flurry. Daniel leaves the apartment, frightened by Louis' rage, and drives off, playing a cassette from the interview. Moments later, Lestat appears like a bat out of hell and bites Molly. Having gained some strength, he puts Molly in the passenger seat and drives the car himself across the Golden Gate Bridge. He turns off the cassette tape, moaning over Louis' constant complaining, and offers Molly a choice, the choice he never had. If you enjoyed this video, don't be shy to hit the like button, and if you disliked it, hit the dislike button twice just to be sure. You should watch the full movie. Thank you very much for watching.